Well, welcome everyone to the Course Development Workshop Series. My name is Kate Johnson. I am the Associate Director of Faculty Development at UAGC. I'm super excited to talk about our subject today of summative assessments. If you can remember all the way back to last month, we were talking about backward design. And I'm just going to do a really quick overview of what backwards design is. So we're going to start with the end in mind as covey for any of the coveyeites out there. Determine the learning goals and objectives, plan the assessments, and then plan the learning activities. So we talked already in subsequent sessions about learning objectives and the importance of them. What does a good learning objective look like? How do we write them? Where do we go to discover that information? And now we're going to look into assessments, specifically summative assessments. So let's make sure that we are defining assessment the same way. So what is a summative assessment? So what we came up with is it is an evaluation of student learning at the end of a unit or course. What is the goal of a summative assessment? It is to evaluate student learning based on the course learning objectives. So I want to point that out because these things go in order for a reason. We need to make sure that we have those learning objectives identified before we can move into the summative assessment. So that is going to be our focus today. We have an incredible panel. They'll introduce themselves. But first off, I would like to welcome Nikki and Natalie to talk a little bit more about summative assessments.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Scott. I am an assessment specialist in the College of Arts and Sciences, specifically the Health and Behavioral Science programs. So when we talk about summative assessments, there's a few things that we came up with for you to keep in mind. This isn't a comprehensive list, but it's just some things that we wanted to highlight. So first, you want to think about how do you want students to demonstrate mastery? And that comes with the explicit alignment of your course learning outcomes. So before your course starts, make sure you have those course learning outcomes finalized. And then this alignment allows you and the assessment team to have more accurate data from Waypoint, which then you can use to make informed decisions in your course. And then the course description and course learning outcomes should guide you when creating that summative assessment, and all of them should be aligned. Another thing to think about is the course level. So where your course is within your program, and also is your course at a bachelor, master's, or doctoral level. So this will determine how you can assess them correctly and meet the students where they are. And another thing to think about is accessibility. We want to ensure that all aspects of the course, including the summative assessment, are accessible to all students. Academic integrity is something we need to think about because there are sites like Course Hero, a way to find out if we have issues with academic integrity in your current course is through the course snapshot. And that's where we will report out any I-ROADs for the course. And then finally, we need to provide students with clear and explicit instructions. And this alleviates confusion and then can lead to greater student performance.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Next, we have Dana to talk a little bit about the faculty perspective on summative assessments.
Well, you give me the mic and that's always a problem. Online environment. As Kate described and Natalie elaborated on, backward design is a planning process.
Hey, Dana, you're
It
breaking
consists
up.
of 3 stages: identifying desired results,
Dana, you're breaking up. I don't know if you want to turn off your camera or something to make your Wi-Fi connection better. Or leave the meeting.
I will say that Dana said that they've been having technology issues in her area. I'm not sure if it was, we had storms roll through last night and she said she's to the west of me. So let's see if Dana, can you hear us?
Straight up kicked me off. Am I back?
You are back. Nikki had a great suggestion. If maybe you want to turn off your camera and see if that helps with the bandwidth.
We'll attempt there. Where did I?
You were frozen almost from the beginning.
At stable. I'm going to holler for 1 second while I turn off my mic.
I appreciate your patience, everyone.
Sorry about that massive request to my son to turn off everything internet related.
You must do what it takes.
with that patience, and I am very grateful for all y'all hanging around. I would like to, as I was saying, pull back the curtain a little bit on this process of institutions that consists of 3 stages. It's identifying our desired results, determining acceptable evidence, and planning learning experiences and instruction. With this order, we focus first on where we want our students to go. What understandings of our discipline will a student walk away with? That first step, identifying desired results, is accomplished through setting those actionable and measurable learning outcomes. And it sets the stage for the next. With that clear destination in mind, we can keep content focused and purposeful. And that second step is where I'm focusing today, determining acceptable evidence. By changing our focus to student outcomes, we fundamentally change our approach to design because we become invested in what students walk away understanding, not how much content we try to cram into any given week or lesson. So let's think about outcomes and evidence. In the previous session where you heard me ramble on, I challenged you to think about where you would like to go if you had vacation time, to think of a destination if you knew that there were resources available to get you there. This time, I'm gonna pick the destination. Based on my research, New York City is the most popular destination in the United States. So that is where I challenge you to go. I would love to hear how you feel about this choice of destinations. Are you excited, bored, anxious, disinterested? Are you curious about how I decided this was the best destination? These feelings matter, but more on that later. As the one who picked the destination, now I need to decide how you will demonstrate to me that you made this trip. What evidence will be acceptable to show that the trip actually occurred? Does it need to be formal evidence like a ticket stub, a receipt, a photo next to a famous landmark? Or will informal evidence like anecdotes, descriptions of your adventures, or even a request for a downtime to recover from the excursion be sufficient? That's what we're accomplishing in stage 2 of backward design, identifying what evidence demonstrates that understanding has occurred. In determining this acceptable evidence is the root of assessment. Well, the actual root of assessment is the Latin verb essere, which means to sit with. We need to sit with our students to see how the learning we need our students to achieve, as defined by learning outcomes that align with program goals, industry standards, and discipline-specific expectations, fits within the circumstances of our students' lives. And we have to offer methods that will allow them to showcase how they have internalized that knowledge. In order to accomplish this, we really need to focus on 2 ideas. What do students need to walk away from our classes knowing, and how can they show us that they know this? The first is done through the construction of those actionable course learning outcomes we keep going back to. And the second is done by considering what paths your students are on and how knowledge can be made to come alive for them. Focusing first on the summative assignment and its assessment allows for the scaffolding of the course as you provide the weekly steps for them to be able to achieve that final task where you can sit with them while they demonstrate what they have learned. The summative assignment will continue to evolve as the course takes shape, as it should. But allowing this iterative process helps focus the course to ensure that each week's tasks, learning activities, and learning resources work together to help support that end goal. And maybe that end goal is a big final exam demonstrating memorization of key terms or a national standardized test. Maybe it's the same 20-page research paper that is available 800 times over on Course Hero. Or maybe it's something new and innovative that will make our instructional design teams scratch their head and say, this is awesome, but how do we make it work? I can't tell you what that awesome idea is. You have to look at your course, your program needs, and your students, but I can share an example. I recently revised Sci 350, Physiological Psychology, a class that I absolutely love, but which can be very challenging for students. When this class came up for revision, I needed to seriously reflect on what students needed to walk away from this class knowing and stop obsessing about the content that I wanted them to see. I had to put my ego aside. To get out of my head, I reached out to colleagues and asked what they wished students coming into their classes or programs knew about the brain. This led to some really interesting conversations about what our students need to know to succeed in the fields they're pursuing. What I found out is that what students needed to know was how to apply research on neuroscience. I was starting to understand what our students needed from the class, but I also needed to identify what was going to stand in the way of this. For physiological psychology, this meant acknowledging several barriers, and this includes the language of the discipline and how to make it matter. The barriers had to be juggled within the context of our instructional delivery. We're an online educational school, and we rely heavily on written language. And we have to consider this in relation to our students' lives. These are adult learners who want to get ahead in the paths they are on, who may not have had a science class in decades, or who may have been told that they were not cut out for the sciences. In this class, evidence of learning would involve students showing that they are experimenting with the language of the discipline, finding terms and concepts within the scholarly literature, and synthesizing it within their own lives by telling stories of applied biopsychology. For their summative assessment, students will provide a mock TED Talk doing just that, an oral communication piece conveying application of key concepts, terms, and ethics. The course development continued with this end assessment in mind, each week providing resources and mastery opportunities that challenge them to build up to this final assignment. By identifying our outcomes first, a clear map was laid out to provide structure to the entire course. Now, this map will look very different depending on the course and the student needs, but the process allows the opportunity to create novel and meaningful assessments and inspire transformational understanding. Thank you for listening, and please reach out if you have any questions or would like to brainstorm.
Thanks so much, Dana. One thing I'd like to ask our participants real quick is, and it might be hard to define because maybe it feels like you've always known it, or maybe it feels like you've only recently known it. When did you become aware of the concept of a summative assessment and its impact on a course? Was that something that you learned as part of your learning, part of your degree? Is that something that you learned the first time you developed a course? Is that something that you're learning for the first time because you haven't developed a course before and really talking about it today is your first large introduction to it? I'd love to hear how folks have come to learn about summative assessments, because I think that very often in post-secondary education, we take for granted that those faculty who may not necessarily have had this part of their education already know this information. So my background is actually in business. So only once I joined academics did I really start to understand the process of course development, and I continue to learn during college, through your doctoral program, K-12, so you learn way back in teacher prep program. Yeah, K-12, absolutely. They probably use this more frequently than we do on a regular basis. The other things that I just wanted to point out that I really love that Dana was talking about, which is she started to ask herself big questions about what she wanted her students to learn. And then she took different pathways to find that information, not only from what her personal experience was in the field, but also reaching out to her colleagues. Her course is part of a program. And so there are courses that lead to learning after her courses. So understanding that the learning is a continuum, and that programmatically, very specifically, do we know what we need our students to be learning at each step so that they're successful on the next step are really important parts. And I really love, Dana, how you talked about the challenges that can be faced by students. And I was just in another meeting where we were talking about language and academic language specifically, and how a student would, go through general education courses and then programs, and learning new language all the time, and how to speak and absorb and also process. So wonderful, wonderful context. Next, let's kick it over to Amy Erickson. She is going to talk about how, as you're facilitating a course, you can use a summative assessment as part of your teaching practice.
Thank you so much, Kate. I'm Amy Erickson. I'm a faculty coach here at UAGC. And last time we talked about looking at the CLOs during prep week to give you an idea of what the expectations were for your students at the conclusion of your course. And we want to do the same thing with the summative assessments. Look at that during the prep week of your course and consider, what can you do to ensure student success in relation to the summative assessments? Excuse me. Kate, can you please forward to the next slide? Thank you. When I'm teaching a class, I like to break it down by the weeks. This is not something you have to do, of course, but these are just some ideas of how to map out how you can contribute to student success and also kind of incorporate that backward design into your instruction. You may want to start out week one by introducing big questions. Here we are again with big questions, right, Kate and Dana? Big questions that relate to the summative assessment and transcend the classroom. This way you can get students thinking about being part of a bigger conversation, and this can help reinforce the importance of mastering the course content. Week two, you can share stories of your own to help break down elements of the summative assessment. Cognitive neuroscientist Daniel Willingham discusses how we carve out specific psychological space for stories. So using your own stories or asking students to share their stories can provide a really memorable learning experience. In week three, are there resources that would engage students in novel ways to enhance learning? Are there gamified resources? Are there resources that will get students specifically interested in in elements of their degree plan? For example, the library databases here at UAGC include massive lists of professional organizations to share with students who are interested in the field, but may not be aware of the various branches of study. These are great to share with students and get them excited about their degree plan. Week four, can you connect content to arenas that interest students? Can you meet them where they're at? If you've got a lot of professionals in your classroom, perhaps share resources that could help them with networking on LinkedIn. Or maybe you have a lot of students who enjoy Twitter or Instagram. You can use these platforms to share relevant content. Remember that cognitive neuroscientist I mentioned, Dr. Daniel Willingham? He's on Twitter. And so is Joyce Carol Oates and many other thought leaders. And introducing students to those thought leaders is a great way to get them to think beyond the classroom into their futures as professionals, and also reinforce the importance of the skills they're developing in this class. Can you connect elements of the summative assessment to students' experience to encourage active learning? This can be really meaningful for students. We all know we love to talk about ourselves and our experiences. So getting students to do that, whether it's in the discussion boards or maybe you open up your announcements so students can interact that way and share their experiences, is a fantastic way to encourage active learning. Finally, use your classroom engagement to provide opportunities for complex thought processes. Use the discussion boards, announcements, and grading feedback to help students connect the dots between the various elements of the summative assessment. Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Amy. Those are great. I love the idea of having a plan for how you're going to facilitate learning when you start. It's really drawing on, right, how K-12 instructors, K-12 faculty approach learning. They have their own lesson plans that they are hoping to accomplish each day. And, students throw us for a loop, but at least if we have a plan, we're heading in the right direction. Next, let's put some learning into practice. Nikki and Natalie are going to talk a little bit about learning objectives and their tie-in with summative assessments.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I'm Nikki Perry. I'm the manager of curriculum and assessment. And I know you've heard some amazing stuff from our panelists about the importance of strong CLOs, scaffolding them through the summative assignment. So I wanted to put things into practice for you all today. And I wanted to give a big thanks to Leah Westerman and Katie Theory, who allowed us to use the Business 303 Human Resource Management summative assignment. Now, I took their summative. They did an amazing job of making sure the CLOs were aligned. And yes, thank you, Katie and Leah. To make sure the CLOs were aligned and that this is a very strong summative. And I took that and I told them, okay, I'm going to edit it and I'm going to put some not so good things into this. So if you can see on the left-hand side, I have their course learning outcomes. These are completely unchanged, and these are very strong course learning outcomes. They're measurable. The verbs are appropriate for a 300 level course. So those were unchanged, but on the right-hand side, this is part of the final paper. I did edit it a bit so that it would fit on the slide, but I took that final paper and then I added some things that don't fit exactly. So I'll also shout out to Ashley De La Rosa. Sorry, I always get distracted by the chat, but I added some components that do not align. So if you all want to just take a moment and kind of look through the instructions, and if you see anything, please feel free to shout it out in the chat. And then on the next slide, I have kind of what the edits I made and why those aren't good best practices and why they don't make for a strong summative assignment. So as you all are doing that, I just wanted to kind of discuss some things that are important in a summative assignment, kind of just to reaffirm what Natalie and what Dana have said, but making sure that you have strong alignment within the CLOs. And what that means is these course learning outcomes, they are what you're telling your students that they will be able to understand once they've completed this course. So that's kind of your promise to them. You're telling them once you successfully complete this course, you will be able to do this. So in order for them to show us that they have been able to do that, you need to have a strong summative, and your summative needs to be explicitly aligned to your CLOs. And I'm just going to peek in the chat right now. So Charles said, demonstrate and create a balance sheet. Not ideal wording. You have 2 Bloom's verb. Yes, that is correct. Also, a financial balance sheet has nothing to do with HR. Well, maybe it does, I should say, but I just added that. It had absolutely nothing to do with the summative. I tried not to make it so wacky, but yes, identify and discuss are 2 words. Thank you, Ted. And when you're writing a summative, you kind of want to think about it kind of like how you're writing your CLOs. So making sure that you have appropriate Bloom's verbs, making sure that you're not using 2 Bloom's verbs, always choose the highest of the 2, making sure that the assignment instructions are clear. So Kate, if you could go to the next slide, I'll show you kind of some of the edits I made. So yes, so for one, identify how an effective performance management system XYZ. So identify is quite a low level Bloom's verb. And if you look at the CLOs, none of the CLOs say identify. And something I do want to stress with the summative is, again, that explicit alignment. So if you tell the students they're going to be able to explain or analyze something, you don't want to then measure them identifying or defining. You want to measure them at the same level of the CLO. That's how you are able to determine if they actually have mastered that CLO. So as you can see, no identify in the CLOs. Demonstrate and create a financial balance sheet. Demonstrate is not a measure verb. Demonstrate and create are 2 kind of verbs together, and a financial balance sheet actually has nothing to do with these course learning outcomes. Again, as people mentioned, identify and discuss, 2 Bloom's verbs. And actually, in the next slide, I will show you the explicit CLO alignment, but I actually removed one of the instructions from this assignment that had to do with CLO 5. So I completely took that course learning outcome out of the summative. So if we were to measure this, We would not have data on CLO5. So again, that's not a best practice. Ideally, you want to measure all of your course learning outcomes in your summative. So if we can go to the next slide, this is the actual paper that Leah and Ashley created. So you can see they have strong measurable verbs. And I also put the course learning outcome alignment next to each deliverable. This isn't in the assignment instructions, but it's just so everybody can see how the CLOs are aligned to the instructions in the paper. And you can see the way that they design the course. Each CLO is being measured either just in one assignment instruction or one or two CLOs. So that gives us some very rich data because we're able to see where students are excelling, and we can see it's very easy for us to just look at that alignment and look at that data. And that helps us when we go to measure data. If we're looking at annual assessment plans, or you go to revise your course and you get your course snapshot, it's really great for us to just have that explicit alignment to allow us to measure how the students are performing. Yeah, so thank you all so much.
Thanks, Nikki. If you hear a screaming kid in the background, I have a sick kid at home. One of the, just to recap, what we're looking at is how the summative assessment evaluates our student learning. So when we've created those course learning objectives, as Nikki was discussing, if the learning objectives do not appear as mappable from your final assessment, then you have not aligned those. We're unable to measure whether or not learning has occurred in that area. And that is part of our, as Nikki was sharing with us the other day, that's part of our contract, is we're saying students will walk away with this information. So we're trying to walk through this information piecemeal. So next month, what we're going to go into is formative assessments. We will talk about how do we allow, what opportunities do we offer our students to practice this learning, and how do we scaffold them to get them to that final summative assessment. The other piece that I wanted to talk about quickly is please know that this workshop is open to all of our associate faculty as well. I know we have a couple in the chat today or as participants. Thank you so much for coming. Lead faculty, department chairs, please share out the invite to all of our associate faculty. They're welcome to attend, but we're also looking for associate faculty to join us in this experience. We know that they have a wealth of knowledge in course development as well. We'd love for them to share with us that information. The last piece, because we have a little bit of time, is if anyone has any questions in the chat around summative assessment, aligning, evidence. We're going to talk after we do formative assessments next month. We're going to talk about a little bit higher order thinking and higher order learning as it relates to the backward design process. Dana touched on it a little bit in the session today about the pathways that she took to help answer some of her big questions for her new class. Any questions that you all have, throw them in the chat. Give it just a minute here. I'd also like to thank Dana, who has stepped in 2 months in a row to save us. So we really, really appreciate, as well as thanks so much to the Business 303 designers for letting us use you as our guinea pigs. All right.
For the internet, but there's one other thing that I would like to share.
Yeah.
Is that present the rosy side of it, right? Oh, everything's good and wonderful, and it's this gleaming example, right? I'm pretty sure that my course would be a good example for what not to do also. And I think it's really important to recognize that we're not perfect in this process and that we need to open this door to have these dialogues. I'm looking at this class now going, oh my God, what did I do? This is terrible. I need to change this. But having these dialogues with these incredible groups is giving me a better lens to which I can look at this and more people that I can talk to and improve in the future. So I'm grateful for these opportunities as well, and always available if anybody wants to have a conversation about it.
Dana, we appreciate you so much. And thank you for talking about the elephant in the room. We're all learning. We all have, the field of teaching and learning is long, but it's also very robust. No one person has all the knowledge about all the things. So we appreciate people being vulnerable and also sharing that maybe they don't know, and they do need support and they do need help. So we hope that through the development dish, which is every week on Tuesday at, I know it's 12:30 Central, so 10:30 Pacific. Not if I'm saying this correctly, team. Yes, okay. As well as the workshop series and eventually more opportunities for the community to discuss what course development can and maybe should look like at UAGC. All right, thank you all so much for joining us. Hope to see you next month when we start to dig into formative assessments. Have a good day.